All right, welcome back, everybody, to the latest edition of the TLR. I am here with David Baye, fresh off his big trip, Poland, buddy.
It was a haul. I was supposed to fly out last Wednesday and arrive in Poland about 4 o'clock on Thursday. Had some weather in Chicago. Wasn't able to make my connecting flight, so I actually flew out late Thursday. Got into Poland on Friday afternoon. Covered the show, did my thing, and flew home at 6 a.m. on Sunday. So got back into good old Appleton, Wisconsin around 9 or 10 o'clock last night. So a quick turnaround, but a trip well worth it. So no complaints here.
All right, well, the big two questions, David, I've literally been gotten deluged with thousands of emails over the last 48 hours. One, why was Robert Pietrkovich not on the show? I would have thought of all people, he would have been the first guy.
Right. I have that I have no idea. You'd think a guy from Poland who's done well in shows across the world would be itching to jump into the first ever IFBB show in Poland. They did have one local guy, the Marek. I forget how to pronounce his last name, but yeah, I figured Robert would have been there as well. You know, it's always, I don't care what level you're at. It's always nice to compete in your backyard where you live. It gives your friends and family an opportunity to come watch you compete. And I thought he would have been there, but whether it was timing for him, other stuff going on, that I couldn't tell you.
And where was Ivan Putski, man? Where's the Polish Hammer?
Ivan Putski. Oh, you're digging deep now.
Come on. What kind of an investigative reporter are you, man? You know, Joe Patero would have been on this like white on rice, bro.
Oh, God.
But, anyway. All right. Other big news before we get into the bodybuilding stuff, David. The Academy Awards on last night. This is, of course, purely off topic. But listen, I got to mention this. My man, Abe Vigoda.
Abe Vigoda.
Abe Vigoda, all right? Fish, all right, from Barney Miller. Sally from The Godfather. I mean, come on. This guy's been in all kinds of completely snubbed during the in memoriam. Nothing.
They seem to do that every year, whether it be the Grammys, the Oscars, whatever. They always seem to forget at least like one person, and without any surprises, they always get kind of backlash on social media and on the internet and stuff for forgetting people. But that happens every year, man. Every major awards show, when they do the in memory of, they seem to forget somebody major.
Well, David, I'd be remiss if I didn't give you major kudos for calling the shot. Your boy Leo winning the big one finally. The Bear, of course, getting no recognition at all, but big thumbs up for the Revenant.
Apparently, if you get viciously violated by a bear and crawl through the snow for 3 hours without getting frostbite, that qualifies you for an Oscar. So, yeah.
Well, it's a big makeup call. That's all right. But all right, listen, let's get into the bodybuilding stuff. Poland, obviously, the first show of the season for the IFBB. So we're off and running. The Arnold, of course, coming up, and we're going to have a full preview coming up Wednesday. We're going to hope to get the master himself, Peter McGuff, back on the airwaves here. So we'll give Peter a shout out and see if he's up for the task. I'm sure he is. He gets excited when contest time starts rolling around. But Poland, all the talk. We gave Kevin all his kudos. A great time and a great show was put on, as I understand, David, and I know you were in full support of that. But let's get into the bodybuilding itself. Cedric McMillan taking top honors. I don't think this really surprised anybody, but I also don't think Cedric was anywhere near 100%. Going to have to tighten it up in another week.
Yeah, it looked like Cedric, along with some of the other guys, were really gunning to peak at the Arnold. Now this was a little bit of a risk that Kevin took, having this timing of the show. A lot of people were talking about it when he announced it late last year, and even leading into the show, was he going to get the big names to enter? It's tough to travel internationally for any show, but to have to travel internationally a week before the Arnold Classic. There was questions. So he got the big names, but it looked like most of those guys, while they look good, it looks like most of them were saving their big peak for the Arnold Classic. So Cedric definitely looked good, but he could still tweak it just a little bit. But the same can be said for most of the guys that were there.
Well, the new kid on the block, Josh Lenarowitz, looking very impressive to me. I'm not so sure he was 100% either, but I tell you what, he didn't look like he was too far off. But the kid's got a lot of muscle, and he can stand with the big boys.
Yeah, I think if you look at pictures, and some of the guys in the forums had posted pictures, his win at the San Marino Pro and at the Ferrigno Legacy last year, he was probably a little bit sharper. He was definitely, from what I saw, he was every bit as full as he was at the last couple shows, but not quite as sharp. But it was a close show. I had a chance to speak with some of the U.S. judges that were there, Sean Andros and Maz, after the show, and they said it was a really tight race between Josh and Cedric. And had Cedric shown, or rather, had Josh shown up just a little bit sharper, he would have been walking away with the win. So, I mean, you look at a guy like Josh. I think he's in his early 30s. So as far as bodybuilding goes, he's relatively young. He's just got a ton of potential. He's not really missing any body parts. For as big as he is, he flows real well. He's got huge quads. And even for being off a little bit, his conditioning was still good. And it's just a super nice kid. It was the first time I've ever had a chance to talk to him in person. As nice as could be, very well spoken, very respectable to everybody else that was there. He was one of these guys who you can tell he was a little bit starstruck or in awe, maybe sharing the stage for the first time with some of the veterans, as the people know who followed San Marino and the Ferrigno Legacy. Didn't go up against guys like Cedric or Branch or Tony or Johnny at those shows. So for him it was definitely a good showing, but also a cool experience to get to compete against some of the guys that he's looked up to for a while.
Now, was he in this week? Is he in for the Arnold?
Yeah, he's in this week for the Arnold, and he's going to be doing the Arnold Australia coming up 2 weeks after that.
Yeah.
So on his home turf, and he trains at Tony Doherty's 24/7 gym. So he's definitely going to be a crowd favorite in Australia, and I think he's probably looking forward to that more than any show he's ever done, I would have to imagine.
Well, Josh, the new kid on the block, the grizzled veteran as it would be, Branch Warren ends up in the number 3 spot. I can't say I was surprised. I mean, clearly this was not the best Branch Warren that we've seen, but, and we're going to get more in depth into this conversation as we go, because as you know, the boards are lighting up. Branch, and I've said this for 10 years now, the toughest guy to place at any show because of the kind of physique he has.
Yeah, no, Branch was another guy that was definitely a little bit off. And like you said, we'll get into that a little bit more. I'd like to think he's probably going to get a little bit better before the Arnold, a little bit tighter in his back shots. But he looked good. Going into the show, there was all this talk. Well, structurally, can he should he beat Cedric rather? He beat Cedric last year at the Arnold. He placed ahead of Cedric at the Atlantic City Europa last year. So there was all that kind of talk. Cedric was a little bit better than he's been at those last couple shows, and the judges rewarded him for it. But and with comparing Branch to Josh, I know there was kind of that veteran versus the young guy thing, but Josh's physique is you just can't deny it. So I don't really know that at this point in Branch's career that unless he were to be 100% and Josh were to be 90% or so. Structurally, I just don't know that Branch beats Josh anymore. But we'll find out another week and then 2 weeks after that.
Well, interestingly, like I said, many, many years now, we've talked about this debate that Branch is not an easy physique. He's not an easy guy, and we've seen him win Arnolds. So we talk about a veteran that's got a whole bunch of titles. He's won everything except the Olympia and taken second in that. But he has to be 100%. I mean, I don't think even Branch denies that. He doesn't have a whole lot of wiggle room like a Cedric McMillan does or like a Kai Green does, that you can be 90%, 95%, and you're still going to beat a good amount of guys just because structurally you're better.
Right.
Branch relies on that conditioning and muscularity, and it seems like he was having a tough time kind of combining the two. Now, that can be for travel considerations. It can be, people tend to write you off in this game, David, as you know, in 2 seconds. One bad showing and, you're off into the pasture. So, can he rebound enough in a week's time that we see a much improved Branch Warren at the Arnold?
Improved, yes, but you gotta look at who he's going up against at the Arnold. I mean, he's going up against Josh and Cedric again, who you'd like to think those guys are planning on improving again or as well rather for next week. And then he's got he's got Compton, he's got Kai Green, obviously, Evan Centopani, who's looking as good as he has in a long time. So Branch is going to go up against a really tough lineup in Columbus this week, and so if he wants to, repeat a third place that he got last year, or rather second, or even in the top 5, really, to be honest with you. He's going to have to make those improvements that he needs to make between this last weekend and this upcoming.
All right. Well, David, we had Tony Freeman, the X-Man, on just last week, talking about some different things. And then, of course, he was off to Poland to compete. A nice finish for Tony. 4th place. It wasn't what he was looking for. However, almost 50 years old, still sporting a competitive physique. I don't think he's the Tony that he was 6, 7 years ago. But competitive in this lineup, did Tony get a fair shake?
Yeah, absolutely. 4th place was a good spot for him. We've discussed it a million times before. As guys get older, the first thing that seems to downsize are the quads. And that's definitely the case with Tony. His legs, for as much as I like Tony's physique, even as it is right now at his age, and for as impressive as it is for him to be even getting on the stage at his age, much less at this level, there's no denying that his quads aren't where they used to be. His upper body still looks every bit as good to me as it ever has. Conditioning-wise, again, same story as with the other guys. He looks like he's looking to peak for the Arnold this upcoming week. So he was a little bit off, but his conditioning was good. I think it was one of the better versions that we've seen of Tony in the last year or two. So a good placing for him in 4th place. Now, the 4th place spot was kind of interesting, and the guys were kind of freaking out online about this. So what had happened was the first call-out was Cedric, Josh, Branch, and Michael Calafianos. And then the second call-out, so presumably a lot of people thought that was your top 4. The second call-out, Tony, Johnny Jackson, Alexi, his last name is tough to pronounce, Clarence DeVise, and one of the other guys.
Ronnie Rocco.
Okay. Ronnie Rocco, yes, thank you. Okay, so those guys were your second call-out. So presumably that's 5th place through 9th place. Now, what happened is when I'm doing the live pictures during prejudging, I'm taking these pictures. There's an app that I have to go through to upload these pictures, so it's not like an instant upload right to the forums. So generally what I do at these shows when I'm covering, if there's a first call-out, a second call-out, a third call-out, I'll post pictures from those call-outs. And then, usually you wait for the final call-out that the judges do with like your top 3 or 4 or whatever. I'll post pictures of those. But every once in a while, we get those middle-of-the-pack call-outs. You get a 4th, a 5th, a 6th call-out where they're trying to figure out, the middle-of-the-pack placings. And they had a bunch of those, actually. I think there was probably 2 or 3 of them. And Michael was in one of those call-outs where they compared Michael next to Tony and jeez, I'm losing it. Tony, Johnny, Alex, and Michael lost a lot of ground in those second call-outs. So when he came out by himself during the free posing, his conditioning was really good. His muscularity looked good. Not the best aesthetics. He was letting his stomach hang a little bit, and he looked like he started fading a little bit during prejudging. We've all seen that during shows. Some guys, gain some steam. Some guys fade. So he started fading a little during prejudging. The other thing that happened is he looked like he was getting a little bit tired up there. And the more tired that he got as he was getting put through the rounds, the more he started relaxing in his transitions and in his turns. And he's not a guy with a small waist, and he really started letting those hang out, especially the side chest, side triceps.
Sure.
So he definitely lost some ground in those middle call-outs. So again, there was a lot of people questioning how was the guy in the first call-out, which looked like your first 4, and ended up placing 7th. That's how it was. There were some call-outs that I didn't get pictures of. I didn't report because they were middle-of-the-pack call-outs.
Well, let me explain this a little bit to the people out there who don't know how judging works. The athletes come out in round 1 in their individual presentation. So you get a quick look at each competitor on their own to display their physique. Now, they're going to basically take notes, and they're going to call out who they think might be in the top 4 or 5, again, however many numbers are called. Every judge is different. Some like even numbers, some like odd. I've seen Big Steve call out anything from 2 guys to 6 guys in that first call out. It's completely up to the head judge. But that does not necessarily mean that's the top 4. So for people questioning it, listen, they're just getting an idea. They're going to give somebody, especially a veteran, they're going to give them the consideration, if they're in shape, to compete. Now, it's up to you to present a physique that's competitive to the guys that you're standing next to. So a Mike Cafalianos can certainly get called out that early, but it doesn't necessarily mean I've seen guys slide 4, 5, 6 places. By contrast, you remember in Olympia years ago where Gustavo Bedell, who I thought was overlooked in the first round, worked his way up into the top 3 by the time that the smoke cleared. So it can work for you, it can work against you, but the judges have to get an idea of who they're looking at and what they're what they're looking for. So people they tend to pigeonhole. They see a guy in the middle, boom, oh, he's in first place. It's like not necessarily. I've seen him take first place and put him on the end before, because now really what they're comparing is second, third, and fourth in the middle. So you kind of got to know what you're looking at.
Yeah, I'll put this one on me. As the person, MD was the only American crew there reporting the show, so I should have made note that there was a couple of middle call-outs and other guys getting compared. If anything, on the judges' standpoint, it's nice to see that, because a lot of the times you don't, the guys on the tail end of the first call-out and the guys on the higher end of the second call-out, people want to see those guys compare. A lot of people are like, well, we have first, second, third figured out. The middle of the pack isn't as important. But if you're a guy who's dieted for 16 weeks, 20 weeks, and a paycheck is on the line, you want to be compared against the middle of the pack. I think the only person that probably wasn't happy, or maybe Tony in fourth place, or I don't think Tony or Alex would have moved up into that top three, but those guys didn't get compared against the top three. But it was nice for Tony and those guys to get compared against Michael, because obviously at the end of the day the judges thought they deserved a higher placing than him. So anyhow, as far as the confusion between how was the guy in the first call out but didn't make top five.
Easy.
That's how it went down.
That's exactly how easy it is. So listen, they gave him a shot. Listen, and he's not one of the biggest guys I've ever seen against that top lineup. Those are some big boys out there. And even though Branch isn't tall like a Cedric or a Tony, he's as thick and muscular as they get. So he can stand his ground being shorter. But Mike K doesn't have either one of those things. So I can see where he could slide back.
Right, and the other thing and I said this in the wrap-up video, which we should have up today, just a little bit of a lag between working with a Polish video crew and stuff like that. But Michael seemed to lose a little bit of ground structurally. That Alex or Alexi looked definitely better from the front than he did his back shots. A little bit soft from his back shots, but he's a big, wide dude. In fact, very similar structurally, I would say, to Tony, where he's a taller guy. He's got to be 6'1" or 6'2", very broad shoulders. So he's got a little bit more of an imposing physique on stage than Michael does. So despite the fact that he wasn't as conditioned, I think that it was justified. I still probably would have had Tony sitting in fourth place still. From what I saw, I probably would have still had Michael in fifth place. Just that's what I would have liked to have seen. But I don't think it was too bad of a call at all.
Well, I couldn't help but notice as I was watching some of the footage and reflecting on some of the things that Tony had mentioned when we had him on the show last week. So these aren't normally things that I would be looking at, but because Tony mentioned them, I had them in my head to kind of key in on. And I got to be honest, I mean, I didn't see any great disparity of people hitting poses. When a front double Baye was called, everybody hit the front double Baye. There was slight variations of it, but nothing out of the ordinary. Everybody hit it at about the same time. Everybody was in about the same place. Not too many, I don't know if I give a lot of credit to some of that, conversation that we had. I don't see it as being a problem.
I tell you what, the only guy who was really lagging, and it became really frustrating for me because I tried to get pictures of everybody hitting the same pose at the same time, was that Clarence DeVries.
Oh, yeah.
To take a good hour and a half to set up every single one of his poses, and he was kind of hurting himself there because the judges were calling the next. I mean, he was barely into the pose when the judges were calling the next one, and from I'm trying to get my pictures, but no, I mean for the most part, and some of the other stuff that Tony had.
Why was Clarence doing that? Now, was he gassing or was he just like being theatric?
No, he was just taking his time. They'd call the pose, and he just set it up for way too long. And
this ain't the Olympia, man.
No, and another thing, that Tony had talked about, and Tony and I had talked for a little while before everything got started. When we arrived, and Tony was, super cool. Real laid back. I mean, just. Just
people.
Basically, there wanted to get business underway. But Tony had talked about how a show should be in a performing arts center. I'll tell you what. And I know I talked a little bit online about the setup and everything that they did. This was a cool event. I mean, this expo hall was a really, really nice expo hall. The expo itself, Sean and Kevin posted a few videos of the expo. Huge expo. And it was crazy, like...
It looked busy. Yeah.
It wasn't as big as the Arnold, but it was crazy like Arnold crazy. DJs, I mean, it was absolutely packed. The stage setup was nice. They had huge video screens on each side of the stage. They had some really cool videos. Sean Ray got like a 5-minute MC intro with all these clips. It looked like a movie trailer.
Sure.
When they were announcing Sean, I mean, a really well done graphics
Cool.
with this really cool music. I mean, it was from start to finish. It was a really cool show. Kevin and Teddy, who actually owns MD Poland, did a really good job of putting this thing on. Hotel was super nice. They had these Mercedes and Audis and all these luxury cars picking the guys up from the airport and the hotel. So we get out from the hotel to cruise over to the expo, and you had a brand new Audi A8, Porsche, one of the Porsche like sedans and stuff. It was a brand new Mercedes, a new BMW. I think they went and tried to get one of like each luxury car, but it was a really cool weekend, and for a first year pro show. But the thing is with Kevin is, he's a former competitor,
Sure.
and so I think he knows how these guys want to be treated, and he knows that he's got guys coming all the way from the United States, and they want a first class treatment, and they did, and a $60,000 purse for the show. So first year show, Cedric got a $25,000 check. So it was definitely a cool event, and it did not take anything away from it not having been in a traditional performing arts center.
Well, listen, I mean, when people can get them, they certainly use them, but everything has to kind of line up. The money's got to be right, the size has got to be right, the backstage has got to be right. That's not something that most people see.
They needed a huge expo hall for this event. I mean, it was legit. It was awesome.
And this was just pros. When you got an amateur event, we're talking NPC here in the States. Let's say it's out of Texas. That's like the Phil Heath that's coming up. Okay, huge monster show. Ed and Betty Pariso putting that together this year along with Phil Heath. There'll be 500, 600, 700 athletes there. You have to have room for 500, 600, 700 athletes backstage. That's a huge consideration, and a lot of those type of venues don't have that kind of room. It's a beautiful performing arts center.
Yeah.
If you had 100 people, but not when you've got 500 athletes and people got to prepare. Girls need dressing rooms. There's tanning people. I mean, how it is, David. There's 1,000 things going on.
The last show I did a couple of years ago, I think there was about 250 athletes, and it was at a performing arts center. I think it seats 1,600 people, so a decent sized performing arts center. But the backstage at a lot of these performing arts centers, especially the smaller ones, at least on a local level, the backstage is set up to accommodate the people who are going to be performing, and in which case, and most of these is a handful of people. So I know backstage, the last show I did, beautiful venue, everything is done really nice, but it was definitely very tight. So that's the thing. Howard, our buddy Howard, brought up the logistics issue, and if you haven't promoted a show or judged them or even been backstage at a show, there's a lot of logistics issues that you run into promoting shows, and a lot of things need to be taken. You look good. Don't worry.
How's the hair?
It looks good.
It doesn't look like it's out of the 80s or anything, does it?
But yeah, man, I tell you what, Kevin and Teddy did a fantastic job. It was a Class A event all the way around. I was impressed.
Little shout out to Howie out there. We love him on the boards. And Howie, I've been inviting you to shows for 3 years now, man. And VIP tickets, the whole thing. He knows. I told him I'll take care of him and his wife. He's just got to get his ass up and get out of the house.
I'm trying to get him to the Arnold. The video that I've been trying to line up for years is the Howard and Mayor of Bodybuilding preview / wrap up / let him argue about whatever video.
Put it out there. Well, the mayor will definitely be there. We see him every year.
We've had him on video before.
Oh yeah, Mayor's a good guy, man. But
I got to get the two of them together. Is what I got to do.
That's going to be tough, but we'll work on that. But David, I want to move into our last segment real quick. The topic of the week, and it's going to continue to be the topic of the week. How do you place Branch Warren in a show?
How do you judge?
How do you judge Branch Warren? Now, this is interesting because now you get into the judging, and you get into one thing outweighing another. You had a very good post earlier today that we were both on, basically saying, okay, we got a guy who's got great symmetry, proportion, structure, but he's smoother than a butter pat. How far does that go in beating a guy out that maybe isn't as blessed genetically, but the guy's granite hard or he's got a ton of muscle? One has to outweigh the other to a point. That is the difficult part for the judges.
Yeah, I've said for a couple of years now that I think Branch is probably one of the most difficult guys to judge because he doesn't really fit in physique-wise with a lot of the other guys. But that's the issue. And for the guys that didn't see the post, or the people who are watching this on video but aren't participating on the forums as much, one, go participate on the forums. But the question I brought up is, you take somebody like Branch Warren, who shows up, and I use these terms, grainy and gnarly, because I'm trying to, with descriptive terms, give people this idea that he looks different from other people. But if you take somebody like Branch Warren, who shows up with a lot of muscle, yes, his back is not where it used to be, especially when he's off. But let's say you take Branch in his top shape, where he's in very good condition. He's got a couple of really good shots, a side chest, a side tricep, his most muscular, pretty crazy shots. But his aesthetics obviously aren't there. How soft can a competitor be who has really good aesthetics, and they deserve to place ahead of Branch? Now, the guy that I used for the example was Brandon Curry. To me, Brandon Curry has some of the best aesthetics in the IFBB right now, arguably the best aesthetics in the IFBB as far as an open competitor and a big guy. But we know since his 8th place finish at the Olympia a handful of years back, Brandon has yet to really, really nail it. So the example I used is, how soft should Brandon Curry be able to show up? Let's just take Brandon and Branch for the sake of a hypothetical argument. Branch shows up at 100%. There's no comparison between structurally Branch Warren and Brandon Curry. Okay, let's say Branch shows up at 100%. How soft can Brandon be, and still deserve a placing ahead of Branch? And that's where this becomes a difficult sport to judge. Like, look, guys, I'm getting beat up on the boards. You're getting beat up on the boards. No, you're never going to hear me sit here and argue that Branch has the prettiest physique.
Branch doesn't even argue that.
His back shots, his back shots from the waist down, actually, his hamstrings and everything from the waist, and his back shots look pretty crazy still. But, he's had some injuries to his back. They're not that good of shots for him anymore. But you still have to give him credit somewhere for his physique, and it creates a very difficult thing. Who it reminded me of was Francisco or Paco Batista, the guy that he made his name, a big splash in the early 2000s. I think he did the 2002 or 2003 Olympia, and that guy came out with some of the craziest legs that anybody's ever seen. I remember Mike Matarazzo saying, "Oh, he could make $1 million off his legs," But same thing, gnarly conditioning, very short arms, a long, thick torso.
It's put together like machinery,
Yeah, guys like that are hard to judge, and people like to kind of say what they want to say about Branch, but where would you have him? If you sat there and you had him in the lineup, and there was guys who are out of shape, but Branch has got less than stellar structure these days, but he's in really good shape. Where do you put him? How do you even judge it? How do you do it?
And here's the thing, David. We hear things like, "Oh, I'd place him dead last." You got torn thing. Listen, you guys hear us say this 100 times. I'm just going to say it 100 more. Okay, when you're there, up front, at the judges' table, and you see Branch Warren come out, no, he ain't the prettiest guy. He doesn't have the best structure, doesn't have the best symmetry or any of that stuff, but he's got muscle. And he's got thickness like nobody else has on there. And you're right, there is a line there that you have to draw. Now, does he win the show in the condition he displayed in Poland? No. But they didn't have him winning the show. Actually, I'll guarantee it was probably closer between him and Tony in 4th. You know what I mean?
He was probably closer to getting
closer to Tony than he was to Josh.
Right.
All right. So, I think they called it right. But listen, he wasn't in his best. Let's say Branch was 90%, just to get percentages out there, as we like to do. When he's 99%, it's pretty impressive still. I don't care anything. Listen, they are going to reward hard work over God-given genetics, just the way it seems to go in bodybuilding. Listen, Dorian, I don't think was the most aesthetically gifted bodybuilder of all time, but he made up for it in a whole lot of muscle mass and graininess and gnarliness and all those other verbs that you throw in there that he's got going. So listen, got him a whole bunch of Sandals, didn't it?
I tell you what, it's not an easy sport to judge. And when you throw in physiques that are kind of weird like that, it's like, if you look back like the 2000s and stuff, it was like, okay, you had Ronnie, the late 90s, early 2000s, you had Ronnie winning, but how do you compare a guy like Sean Ray to a Marcus Rule? And those are two guys they were competing against each other in the late 90s and early 2000s. How do you compare Sean Ray to Marcus Rule? Marcus Rule outweighed Sean by probably 80 or 90 pounds,
Oh, yeah.
twice as wide as Sean. And Marcus, for the most part, brought really good conditioning. How do you compare that to Sean Ray when you're competing in open? And I think sometimes people forget just how difficult it can be when you don't have weight classes in the open division anymore. You don't have height classes. You don't even have, you obviously don't have structural classes. Now they've added classic physique to try to kind of go in that direction. But I tell you what, there's some guys who make it very, very difficult on the judges.
You just brought up a good idea I got, David. Here's your $1 million idea, okay? I think we swing the pendulum the other way. Okay, we come up with this classic physique to kind of capture the Zane days and all that, the glory of that. Listen, let's go the complete opposite way. Let's create like the monster division, the freak division.
Freak division.
Right? Listen, no aesthetics, right? No symmetry, no proportion. Just the biggest, most muscular freak out there wins. I'm telling you.
No, it still wouldn't be easy because there would still be the issue of conditioning.
Yeah, but you see, that all comes. Listen, you get penalized. It's like the bizarre world of bodybuilding. Okay? You actually get penalized. You get penalized for being too aesthetic or too symmetrical. So it goes. I'm telling you, there's something to work with here. We got this one.
No, it would. You still wouldn't keep people happy. You know why? Because you'd have a situation where a Ramy went up against a Branch Warren, and in the same argument that we're having with Brandon
Right.
Curry and Branch Warren, we could have with Ramy, and we could say, how big does Ramy have to be while being soft before he beats a gnarly Branch Warren? Look, there's your muscularity, there's your aesthetics, proportion, symmetry, whatever you want to call it, and there's conditioning. And the fact that bodybuilding is judged off of those three things is always going to make the sport difficult. And if you want to have some sort of guaranteed win, just show up like Ronnie Coleman in the late '90s, where you have the best of all three,
Right.
and there you go.
Well, let me use your own example to illustrate your own point. Okay, why did Marcus Rule never beat Sean Ray? Because Sean Ray, while clearly superior in symmetry, proportion, shape, presentation, all that stuff, was never out of shape. Never. You never saw Sean Ray out of shape. One time, which is arguably, I think it was his first or second Olympia when he was out of the mix. That's it. In 12 years, this guy shows up in great shape and in condition and in contention for the win. So a Marcus Rule could never beat a Sean Ray as long as Sean Ray is in condition. So a Cedric McMillan, a guy with a Brandon Curry. If Brandon shows up peeled to the bone, listen, he writes his own ticket, man. You can't beat him if you can't beat him genetically.
No, that's a really good point. If you were to take Brandon Ray and
Brandon Curry, take anybody named Brandon.
Brandon Ray too.
Sure.
If you were to take Brandon Curry and give him the consistency of a Sean Ray, the conditioning consistency of a Sean Ray, you'd never see Brandon Curry lose to Branch Warren.
That's just true.
Now, it would never happen. If Brandon Curry would show up consistently shredded like some of the other guys do, he would never lose. So if these guys, if the guys complaining want to see Branch place lower, it's like, well, tell the other guys to show up in shape. I mean, let's for an argument, this Poland show, where should Branch have placed in Poland? Behind Tony? Behind your fifth place Alexei? Behind sixth place Johnny Jackson? Behind Michael? For the guys complaining about this particular show, and I understand the guys who at last year's Arnold. Personally, I had Justin Compton ahead of Branch at last year's Arnold.
You could make that case, sure.
I'll make a good argument for that. But at this particular show, if you don't like where Branch placed, where would you have placed it? Now, like I said, coming up in Columbus this next week, there's a strong chance we might not see Branch in the top 5, or he might be at the outside of that top 5 with Justin and Cedric and Kai and Josh, placing ahead of him. But it'll be interesting to see. But at the end of the day, it's a subjective sport. Physiques you like, physiques you don't like, and guys like Branch make it difficult to judge.
Well, what you're going to see here is the classic Branch showdown. Like I say, if he nails it, he's in first. If he doesn't, he's in sixth. So there's your early prediction. We'll get into predictions.
Early prediction.
Early. Double secret probation.
Bob, one more thing I wanted to touch on. One of the guys on the boards just brought it up a couple of times, and I can't seem to grab his name, but I promised we'd touch on it. The Olympia Europe. I know we're still kind of waiting on some information.
I have some.
Okay. I've been a little bit confused because, to me, it's when you have the Arnold Classics all over the world. You have an Arnold Classic winner. You're the winner of the Arnold Europe. You're the winner of the Arnold Brazil. But with the Olympia, it's kind of just like you just think, okay, you won it. You're Mr. Olympia. But now they're having a Mr. Olympia Europe. Do you know? Is there a professional IFBB competition there? Is the winner going to be called Mr. Olympia Europe?
Okay.
Fill us in a little.
Here's the deal. Yeah, I do have some information. The Olympia Europe is very much like the Olympia Amateur. Okay, consider it in the same league, only in the fact that it's a title and it's using the name Olympia. It is not a Mr. Olympia title. Okay, there's only one of those. There's only ever going to be one of those. And I know Robin Chang and the crew at AMI are very, especially Robin, very attentive when it comes to the Mr. title, very protective. The 212 isn't a Mr. title. The men's physique is not a Mr. title. The women's physique is not a Mrs. title. All right, those are specific titles. Phil Heath is Mr. Olympia. That's it. Flex Lewis, with all due respect, is not Mr. Olympia. He's the
212 Showdown champion.
Olympia champ. Now, listen, I'll call him the 212 Mr. Olympia all day. You can call him that unofficially. Officially, they're not Mr. titles. The Olympia Europe will just be a show, basically, with the Olympia theme in Europe. Okay, so yes, it'll have pro attached to it. The winner is not another Mr. Olympia. So let's just say, hypothetically, Dennis Wolf goes in and he wins the Olympia Europe. Is he Mr. Olympia? No. He's the Olympia Europe champion, just like as he's the Europa Dallas champion or any other show.
Okay, so could we say it's similar to the way the Arnold Classic started here in the United States, and then we had an Arnold Brazil, an Arnold Europe, an Arnold Australia?
Yeah. Now they're not as tight on their stuff. Like you can still call yourself an Arnold champion. Like they don't designate Brazil or hey man, you're the Arnold Australia champion. They're very open with their title, and that's fine. They can do whatever they want. But the difference is you're not a Mr. Arnold winner.
Right.
That's kind of the biggest difference. You're the Arnold Classic champion, and that's, but there's no, you're not Mr. Arnold. There's only one Mr. title, and that's Mr. Olympia. All the other titles have different connotations. The New York Pro champion is the New York Pro. He's not Mr. New York. You know what I mean? You're not Mr. Dallas Pro. You're not Mr. Really, when you look at it, there's only really one Mr. title, and that is, of course, the Mr. Olympia, which will hopefully, and I don't have any reason to believe it won't, will always be like that. I like it without any distinction. I like it that there's nobody, Flex Lewis doesn't take on, Phil Heath for the title. They're not different classes. They're different divisions. Big difference. But hopefully that clears up some stuff, David.
So just so we're clear, there's a pro bodybuilding show. It's going to have IFBB men's pro bodybuilding.
That's correct.
It's an Olympia Europe, but there's no Mr. Olympia title attached to the winner.
Yeah, just consider it another pro show, just like the Poland show you were just at.
Okay.
Or any other show. But hopefully that'll clear up some confusion. We'll know more, obviously, as the season pans out. Obviously, that show not too far after the Olympia. So, but that's going to wrap it up here today, David. We're out of time, but we will be back again in 48 hours. Hopefully, with the return of the master himself, Peter McGuff. We're going to reach out to Peter, and I understand he will be in Columbus with us for our full coverage. So it'll be great to have Peter back. And we're going to get him on the show. So his return to TLR in just a few days. Wednesday, we'll have a new show up for you guys, but we'll be on the boards all night long. You guys want to battle it out? Just bring it.
Just bring it. I'm here all night.
I'm here all night. Thank you. Good night, everybody. For David Baye, this is Bob Chick. Later.